My name is Ewan Croft. I'm the technical art director at Hangar 13 Games. And today I'll be talking a little bit about how Hangar 13 is using Houdini and how we use it on Mafia 3 and how we plan to use it on future projects. A little bit about Hangar 13. We're focused on story-driven open-world games, which is what Mafia 3 was. Studio was founded in 2012. We're based about 30 minutes north, and we have about 140 people here and about 60 people at our studio in the Czech Republic. Our first project was Mafia 3 that we built as a team, and that was released in October of last year, and we are definitely hiring for our next project, so check out hangar13games.com if you want to join a really dynamic team. My name is Ewan Croft. I started in the game industry as a 3D artist. I'm the technical art director. I transitioned to real-time effects and then joined 2K as an effects artist, and I started using Houdini about 6 years ago. Why do we choose Houdini? There's a lot of options out there, a lot of different tools to do the kind of things that we started using Houdini for. Namely, that was spectacle events. Spectacle events are what we call large-scale destruction events, big buildings, towers, and things like that crashing down. So Houdini's core competency really suited that task, so that's kind of where we started. We needed a spectacle event pipeline, and so we built Houdini into that pipeline. Our animation exporter, based on our character pipeline, which we built from the ground up, worked with FBX and Alembic, so that made Houdini a great choice right out of the gate. We built a custom exporter for our spectacle events that we call Wreck and Crew, and that can ingest Houdini data very readily and get it into game very quickly and easily. Why do we choose it? It's very fast and stable, especially if you're doing bullet sims for large-scale destruction. Even when these scenes get pretty complicated, it's still remarkable how quickly we can iterate and how stable the process is. Integrated solvers, that's something that if you're using plug-in solutions and other 3D apps, you just don't find. If I have a big water tower falling down and that volume of water hits a bunch of cars, the fluid will actually buoy and push the cars around. So rigids and flip fluids are interacting and playing well together, and that's pretty unique. Powerful constraint network. This is how we really choreograph big structures and towers and things like that, collapsing and disintegrating. And what you see here in this picture is a perfect example. That is a constraint network where we have painted the strength of those bonds. So I can have something fall apart and kind of crash and crumble, and if I don't like it, I can take a paintbrush and kind of strengthen up this joint or weaken that joint and really choreograph how that structure comes apart. And that's, again, a very powerful feature in Houdini that's pretty unique. Also, procedural fracturing. We do a lot of stuff with Voronoi because we're working in real time, but we also craft a lot of our sort of pre-fracturing. The new Houdini 16 Boolean stuff, I can't remember the gentleman's name, Mr. Keating, he's not joking around. That thing is a beast. So we're throwing a ton of cutters at this, getting perfectly clean geo and creating essentially digital assets that will cut for wood, masonry, and these kinds of things. And it's very, very, very clean and very fast. What do we use it for in Mafia 3? We started blowing stuff up. Again, we started with content. So we did large-scale rigid sims, buildings, towers, bridges, things like that. We did soft body sims for kind of collapsing girders, metal structure, and things like that, deforming and collapsing. We also used it just for straight-up real-time particle content. That's rendering flipbooks to play back on particles. And we just rendered those in Mantra and exported them to game. So I'll show just a quick little reel I put together. And this is some of the work we did for Mafia 3. Again, rigids, soft bodies, and pyro. Play back on particles. There's the rigid sim, kind of a gray block, so you kind of see what's going on. There's a soft body sim of kind of a structure collapsing, more destruction. We broke a lot of stuff in Mafia 3. This was a setup where this bulldozer crashed through and exposed a whole nother game space, and there's enemies shooting at you through there. And again, these large set piece destruction events, Houdini served us extremely well. Again, that's some pyro and traditional real-time effects content as well as rigid bodies. Diving a little bit deeper, we use pre-fractured packed geometry typically. It's very, very efficient. It leverages our existing animation pipeline, so it makes it very efficient for us. Side Effects released some game dev tools that really helped us out, and we actually were able to streamline our exporter a great deal by using those game dev tools that were published maybe a year ago. But actually, those tools ship native in Houdini 16, so you don't have to bother with that anymore. And it's really, really powerful. Initially, we were limited to 128 joints. That's 127 chunks plus a root. So it was kind of a hassle. We'd have to export multiple chunks for every setup. If you wanted to iterate, it was a huge pain. But we've since solved that problem, and now we're exporting 1,000 plus chunks and really not having any problem at all. Soft bodies, again, we're using wire and cloth sims to simulate steel girders, steel bridges, towers, and things like that coming down. We actually use kind of a unique approach. We actually play a sequence of blend shapes to do our deformation animation. So that it leverages our existing animation pipeline. It's very efficient. One of the limitations is that it requires a consistent vert index. So you can't have a dynamic topology like a big fluid volume with a crazily changing topology. But apparently, I believe it's Ruiz, one of the tech artists at CESI's, got some new techniques to address that. So we're very excited to dig into that. It's also highly optimizable. We can actually adjust the frame step. So we'll sim them at 30 frames a second, but we can actually only activate blend shapes every 4 frames or so, every 6 frames. It's remarkable how forgiving it is. And the upside of that is you save incredible amounts of data, orders of magnitude, smaller animation files. So that's also a big boon. And of course, the soft body solvers are really powerful. And again, we can iterate quickly, and kind of the name of the game. Real-time particle effects content. This is actually, we're rendering pyro fluids, flip fluids, and things like that, just rendering them out in Mantra. And we can actually, we just use a mosaic node to spit out a sub-UV texture that is, automatically plays in game. It works very, very quickly, so we can just click on the raw output, spit out a texture that's game ready, so we don't actually have to go into Photoshop and do all the, composite it into a contact sheet or use a plugin or whatever. We started using generating our motion vectors as well, and Houdini's perfectly capable of doing that. But we found a tool off the shelf that does it equally well, so we'd rather spend our time doing the things that we can't solve by purchasing it. So looking forward, so that's kind of traditional game content creation, but we want to start looking into procedural content. How do you give designers and artists the ability to create tools, if you will, to create content with parameters that they can distribute to the team that they can then use without, a lot of engineering support? And engineering support is incredibly valuable, so we want to empower artists and designers to do as much of that work themselves. And we do that with Houdini Engine. So, and working with Judith and a number of the great folks at Side Effects that came out, they put us at ease in terms of implementing Houdini Engine. And our engineers who were initially quite skeptical ended up signing up and getting on board with the idea. And so far, the process has been very smooth. Our strategy is start small. We wanted to be very, very conservative in our approach. And one thing Houdini does really well is instantiate geometry on points. So we can scatter points based on lots of rules. We're scattering instantiated existing assets. So they're very memory efficient. It's not generating a bunch of crazy geo. And it's very, very fast. And artists can create these tools to deliver this content in game without engineering support. We also want the ability to generate and process geometry, and I'll show a little bit more of that in a second. But again, we're not getting super crazy. We just want to be able to, sweep a ribbon along terrain or something like that for a decal or a road or whatever. And we also want it to be very native. We wanted to get rid of the voodoo. We didn't want people to have to be, Houdini power users to use it. So Houdini assets show up in our editor as standard game assets. So when we started, the engineers are saying, okay, you want us to dedicate engineer and implement Houdini Engine. Show me what you want to use it for. Don't tell me, we get very excited and waving my hands. But so we decided to show with a fence tool. One of the reasons we did that is we kind of had a metric to compare it against. We had built a power line tool. We had a very talented tech artist who worked on it for about 2 months. Basically, you place power lines, it connects the wires, you can move them around, the wires stay connected. It required some system engineering support. It required some render engineering support. So we had kind of a metric. We knew about how long something like that would take. So we decided to take on a fence tool that was pretty similar. We created a fence tool. It's pretty similar. We draw a line and it'll create a fence on terrain. And we showed that, and engineers were pretty happy because they saw right away how much time and how much headache it would save them, so we didn't have to go and bother them every time we wanted some kind of little toolbox that we could work with. And I'm going to show a quick video of that. Again, I'm not like super high production value. I just kind of captured that on my editor. But what you see here is I'm dragging, I have a digital asset that creates the fence. I'm applying the terrain I want it to account for, and I'm applying the control spline, and there you go. It's, if you're a Houdini user, this is not rocket science, but it was created very quickly. This tool was created in about a day and a half. So compared to the power line tool, you can see here, you can edit the defining curve, and it updates the fence. You can adjust the terrain, and the fence will follow, which means that if somebody changes the terrain, they don't have to worry about going and recreating that fence, replacing all the kits that make up that fence. We've also set up some parameters that I run through pretty quickly here. The distance between posts, how many wires, how tall is the fence. And then things like sag and noise, so it looks like the wires have kind of been sagged down over time, or that they got kind of janky when they were unwound from the spool when they were assembling the fence. And these parameters are pretty straightforward to set up. So at the end, we kind of had sag, we had noise and all that, but still, it looked quite regular, very procedural. All the posts were perfectly aligned and all that. But again, we created this decay tool, this decay parameter, which you'll see here as soon as we activate it. It'll look like the ground shifted and the posts kind of settled in different ways, and it gave it a much, much more natural appearance. And again, this doesn't just create the render geometry. You'll see here, that's also the collision geo, so that AI doesn't try to run through the fence. And this was made in, a matter of, let's be very, generous and say it was 2 full days, but it wasn't. But let's call it 2 full days. As an engineer, when they're looking at that, they're going to be pretty stoked, because compared to the effort they had to provide in terms of supporting the power line tool, it's quite an efficiency gain. Another case study is we wanted vines to grow in real time. Again, there's tons of great examples in the Houdini community of vine growth, space colonization stuff, really, really great work out there. But the problem is that the points are being created dynamically, and we need a consistent vert index in order for us to be able to display that deforming geometry in our engine. And so we created this tool here where the vert index is consistent from the start. And so you can create a vine from a control curve, and we can animate it in engine. And again, I'll show that real quickly here. What I'm doing here is I'm just drawing a line that's going to serve as the sort of backbone of our vine. And I'm going to go ahead and plug that into the Easy Grow Vine machine. And I'm doing that now. And now as I start sliding the timeline, you'll see that the vine will grow along that curve. Again, you've seen examples of this before. It'll generate branches for you. You can, we have parameterized branch length and where the branches grow with the random seed, how many branches, the variance in length between the branches and all that. But the real trick here is that the vertex index is consistent. So we can animate this deforming geometry in engine, and it's compatible with our animation pipeline. And again, you can create the control curves, using pops, so you can do them procedurally. You can draw them on surfaces, whatever. So I'm animating here, and I'm just showing that point count remains consistent, and that was necessary for us to be able to play it back in game. Another case study is ecosystems. Now, this picture on the right here is one of the wonderful environments that are created by Peter Zaveski, who's standing right there. Amazing artist. But we created a bayou. Essentially, this is a wetlands. It's our vision of Louisiana. So we had to go and populate a huge area with foliage, grass, trees, bushes, wetlands, bugs, and all this kind of thing. And it literally was artists pulling all-nighters at the end of the project trying to fill this space. So we have a paint system. It works pretty well, but we're definitely taking it to the next level for our next project. But how can we do this procedurally with a click of a button without having to go and paint this stuff? So again, we don't expect a finished, polished, natural wonder. We expect a really rock-solid starting point that artists can then go and spend their time crafting and not spending their time just getting this environment stood up. So we define an ecosystem as a digital asset. So you have wetlands or high desert or whatever, and it scatters or instantiates our existing foliage assets. So again, it's very memory efficient. And it does that based on the slope of the terrain, or based on elevation, proximity to water. We can mask it out with roads and other static assets like buildings and things like that, so you don't get trees growing through buildings. We assign that ecosystem to a terrain. We use our existing paint system to mask exactly where we want it, and we can also use that paint data to craft that ecosystem. So if it's full red, you'll get big trees. As you start to feather out, you'll start getting smaller shrubs and grasses and things like that. So you can actually paint with a fairly natural reaction to that paint data. Again, it uses our existing assets. It's instantiating existing assets. So it comes with all their, their dynamic properties, their materials, LODs, collisions, everything. We don't have to bother with any of that in our digital asset, which is really helpful. Once that ecosystem's baked, artists can go in and craft. They can delete trees, they can move trees, they can add trees, they can do whatever. But again, they're spending their time making the space beautiful and really crafting it, and not spending their time just simply populating it, and then with what time is left going and actually really crafting it and getting it to that finished state. Here we go. Here's a video of this is sort of a prototype of one of our digital assets. And what I'm doing here is I'm just inputting a piece of test geometry as terrain, and I'm now inputting which asset I want instantiated. Again, these are just blocks, but you can see that based on the rules of the terrain, it will essentially scatter our trees however we want it. And in this case, it's parameterized, so we can adjust the density, we can adjust the slope angle on which the trees will be instantiated, we can limit it by elevation, and again, later on I'll show another quick clip where it demonstrates sort of how masking by roads and things like that. So this, I'm just applying a scatter pass, and I'll call these trees. And I can adjust the density and the slope angle and the scale variance. We spin everything randomly on the z-axis, actually the y-axis in Houdini, but that means that even with just a single pass, you get trees that are rotated and scaled naturally and look fairly natural based on where they're being instantiated. Now here's a second pass. This could be bushes or something like that. And again, I'm nudging the elevation limit. So maybe this is kind of a bush that grows on lower terrain or something like that. And I'm adjusting density, and we'll do one more pass here. One thing we found was that when we want our trees growing up, we don't want our trees growing sideways out of hillside. So typically we'll have it randomize a slight pivot from that control point. But we also found that we wanted bushes and things to actually follow the terrain topology, and so we can actually inherit some of that normal from the terrain so that bushes will actually grow out of the side. So again, any kind of functionality we want to add to our tool, we can do that. We can even do that retroactively and regenerate that ecosystem and get a very consistent result. So that's kind of an example of what we're doing in Engine. We can do as many passes as we want, and this again shows kind of instantiating foliage, but you can do anything. We can do bug particle system. So if I get a bunch of flowers in a field, then I can say for every 10 flowers I want one bug particle effect system and get that. That'll come with audio, and eventually we want to do audio as well. So you can actually just create a fairly full-fledged ecosystem, at least get a very good starting point. Again, this is the name of the game, is getting it stood up quickly and then giving the artist as much time as possible to craft. Another case study is roads. This is an incredibly complicated problem. So again, we're starting small. We want to be able to have designers generate a road network using spline data, and then use that spline data to generate a drivable prototype terrain, as well as kind of adjust the terrain so that it looks like a natural road network. We're doing that by, actually, I'm going to just go to the video so you can see it, and I'll explain it while we're watching the video. So essentially, the designer provides us with a spline. We're just matching that spline to the terrain, but the problem with that is the terrain is not drivable. So you'll get a road that's kind of following crazy inclines and declines and things like that. So what we're doing is we're smoothing that road and then retrofitting that smooth curve to the terrain. So you can see it'll mask the ecosystem. And as I zoom in here, you'll see that we're essentially adjusting the terrain so it looks like a bulldozer came through and actually plowed through and created a road. Again, creating roads is a very complex problem. You can see our representation of the design data, the traffic flow, and things like that. But again, this is how we can use a simple control spline to generate a country road that will affect the ecosystem, that will generate the terrain. And that means that artists don't have to go back and resculpt that terrain to match a road based on a design change that made my driving a lot more fun. So what are we doing moving forward? We're looking at a couple of different things. Number one, VFX content. We are very excited about some of the new functionality we found in Houdini 16. Mr. Keating was not kidding around about that Boolean. We are really putting that thing through its paces, and it is generating remarkable fracture geometry. Stunning. We used to have to craft it cut by cut, and that's no longer the case. It is really a very, very powerful addition to Houdini. We're also using it to generate real-time effects content. Again, pyro sims, flip fluids for squibs, hit spanks, things like that. We want to obviously continue into our procedural content push. We're developing a proper full-fledged team. The first things we're tackling are ecosystems. Again, we want to really speed that up. Roads. We're working on procedural assets, like a fence is a good example, but buildings, walls, interior spaces. I can give it a volume for a living room. It'll pull from our existing furniture assets and propagate some variation of a living room, a dining room, or whatever. And design guys are actually taking some very innovative approaches, taking gameplay telemetry and using that to place pickups to adjust where AI spawns and things like that based on the actual gameplay feedback. Some of the R&D we're doing, like kind of pushing the envelope or at least looking forward, we're putting the new terrain tools in Houdini 16 through their paces. Currently we use World Machine, but and also a lot of manual crafting. But so far we're pretty impressed with the terrain tools. Photogrammetry data processing. What you see here in this picture is kind of a very quick test we did. This is a piece of terrain that we scanned. All the graphs and all that is actually animated, and it's all procedurally applied in Houdini. That's actually a flip fluid stream that we can capture a flow map and apply to a game res mesh for the water surface. And that's kind of what we're looking at for some of our photogrammetry push. And there are also some kind of more little bit out there things. NVIDIA published a really interesting paper in 2010 about screen space particle rendering, and we're thinking about applying that to large scale volume, fluid volumes and things like that, and also pyro. One of the problems with pyro doing it in the traditional particle way is that when you walk up on it, it's obviously camera facing and will try to stay oriented, but when you're looking down on it, you'll get a fire that's sideways. And we're thinking, can we actually generate very, very quickly using a pre-cached point cloud into a volume using screen space rendering of volumes. So that's we're working with one of our very, very, very smart render engineers on that. And that's it. I cruised through that really quick, didn't I? But do you guys have any questions at all? Cool. Well, thank you very much, you guys.